All right, we're underway with the first regathering, Modern Israel, and we're in section one at the table of contents. Now, before we go any further, I want to give you a few thoughts of my philosophy behind giving you this big, thick notebook. I've given you a detailed workbook for two reasons. Number one, so you won't have to be distracted by note-taking. Now, I know some of you love note-taking and all that, but I hated it whenever I'm a student because I always get distracted. I try to listen to what the guy is saying, and then I try to write it down, and I miss things, both on the paper and what he's saying. So I've given you 99% of the material. Well, maybe not 99, 95% of the material is before you. So please don't feel that you have to take notes. Just concentrate on the material, concentrate on the slides, concentrate on the concepts that we're sharing with you, the new names, the new people, the new locations. And when you go home, open your notebook and review it all, okay? So you can get the material twice, once in the lecture and second when you're at home, and review the material. Okay, so that's the idea behind having a very detailed notebook. But secondly, in regard to having the material for reference later on, in 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years, your Jewish friend comes over for a visit, you start talking about Israel, well, you can pull out your notebook and review, and go over it with them and say, and have the facts before you. And if somebody is really negative toward Israel, you can help them understand and refute the propaganda that comes out about Israel by pulling out your notebook and reviewing the facts, okay? So I want you to have that notebook for long-term use, okay? So you don't have to take notes. Please don't feel that you need to. You might want to jot something down here and again. I don't guarantee everything I say is in there. And so focus on the lecture and keep your notebook for further use, all right? Make sense? I hope so. Right? Of course, right. There you go. Okay. All right, table of contents. That's the first page in your workbook. You see I break tradition. I have a bibliography in the front. We'll go through some of the works in that bibliography, and those are references you can turn to for further study. All right, well, let's go then to page 3. Page 3 starts the bibliography. I'll highlight some of these books, but all this material, some way or another, has found its way into this class. All right, page 4. Some periodicals and pamphlets have found their way into the class as well. There's a few of the periodicals and pamphlets I've used. Video. Now we can get a lot of video these days, and we're going to be looking at a number of videos as we go through this class as well. And you could pick those videos up if you want to. Plus, there's others there that I don't always have time to go through it all. And finally, internet websites you can look at the bottom. So these are resources you can use for further study because I'm not going to be able to go through all of this in great detail. All right, turn to page 5. Page 5, you see a table of contents from the Jewish Virtual Library. I'll give you that website address in just a few minutes. But you can see from that table of contents that Zionism is a very extensive and complex subject, isn't it? Many, many, many topics they have listed there. So that's a good source for learning about Zionism, the Jewish Virtual Library. Alrighty, so there's our bibliography. We're now on page 7. See, we're just flying through this notebook, aren't we? All right, page 7. Let me start with some introductory thoughts. Let me start from the beginning saying that very little information that teachers share with their students consists of really original material. Most teachers are passing on to others what they receive from their classes and what they've learned from the research of others. And that principle applies to this class as well. This class will not be particularly original. I don't claim it to be. For the most part, I'll be quoting and paraphrasing the thoughts and research of others. And you can see the sources in the bibliography. The bibliography in pages 3 and 4 are the sources of my material. But before we get into the material, I want to highlight for you 2 of the major sources from my class for your further study if you want it. Now, one of the books that are listed in the bibliography is the complete work of Howard Zachar's A History of Israel. Here is my copy of the book. Howard M. Zachar. It's published by Alfred A. Knopf Company. And it covers the history of the modern state or Zionism in the modern state from 1807 to 1975. It's considered the gold standard. This is considered a very complete and accurate history of Israel. Again, from Zionism, from the rise of Zionism to our time. Well, when he wrote the book, it was 1975. So he then went on and wrote a second volume, A History of Israel, Volume 2, from the aftermath of the Yom Kippur War. This one goes from 1975 to 1982. Again, Howard M. Zachar, but this one is now published by Oxford University Press. The first one by Knopf, Volume 2 by Oxford. So the vast majority of the comments I will make in this class come from these two books. It's the most complete and authoritative work on the subject up until 1982 anyway. So again, that's in your bibliography. That's in your bibliography. And of course, Zachar's work covers the subject in much, much more detail than I'll be able to do here. So if you want to be able to get into, really right down into the nuts and bolts of everything, that's the book you should get. So I'm really indebted to that book. Now, in your workbook, you will find a lot of footnotes on many of the pages. And I'm footnoting most of the most important quotes found in A History of Israel. So if you buy the book, you can go to that remark by checking on the footnote in your workbook. Now, some other works that I've used. Here's another work by Dr. Arthur W. Kack. It's produced by King Brothers, The Death and Resurrection of Israel. Now, I've had this book a long time, so I don't know if it's still in print. So you might have to search around a little bit for it, but Dr. Kack has done a fine job on this subject, the death and resurrection of Israel.
What years does he cover this?
I don't remember the years he covers there. All right, so I recommend it, but you know, past history is past history. It's just the recent stuff you won't get. All right, another book that I would recommend highly that I've used here. You'll see some of the maps that come out of this book. Atlas of the Arab-Israeli Conflict by Martin Gilbert, also produced by Oxford University Press. That again is in your bibliography. Now this is the conflict in visual terms, done by maps. So if you're a visual person like I am, like charts and maps and all that, this is a great resource for you to get a feel for what was happening when and who was moving where. You know, that kind of thing. So I recommend this Atlas of the Arab-Israeli Conflict very highly. Again, Oxford University Press. Whoops, so let me back up there. Again, he covers 1000 BC to 1993. Of course, the stuff in 1000 BC he runs over very quickly. But you get the detailed maps regarding 1948 and following. All right, so I like that one a lot. Let's see. On the internet, here's that Jewish Virtual Library website. And again, this is in your bibliography under websites. And the address is www.jewishvirtuallibrary.org. www.jewishvirtuallibrary.org, so it's an easy website to find. This is the home page, and you'll see on the home page there's a Israel button. Just click on that button and you'll come to the Israel menu. And if it's all alphabetical, and at the very end of the menu, down in the lower right, you'll see the topic of Zionism. And that's what we're studying, Zionism in the history of Israel. You click on that word and you get this long, long, long menu of all the topics and people involved in Zionism. So you'll get some real detailed information there if you want to study the modern state. Okay, so that's another recommended place for you to go. Now, we all have access to Wikipedia. And that's a worthwhile place to go, but a word of caution. Wikipedia is an open source encyclopedia. Some of the articles in regard to Israel are very, very slanted and anti-Israel. Okay? So when you use Wikipedia, use it with discretion. Okay? Read analytically. You will find a lot of information on Wikipedia. I go there, but again, I use it carefully, okay? So keep that warning in mind. All right, let's see. I think I've covered, well, not covered everything yet. Now, here's some more additional resources. This is in our library across the hall. The Complete Idiot's Guide to the Middle East Conflict by Mitchell Bard, Alpha Books. So you can check that out. Also in our library by Mitchell Bard, Myths and Facts, A Guide to the Arab-Israeli Conflict by the American-Israeli Cooperative Enterprise. You can check that out if you're interested as well. These are two good little books to use if you want to do some more research beyond this class. Now here is a very important book. I don't think it's in our library. I have a copy of it. From Time Immemorial by Joan Peters. Now the Palestinians hate this book. They hate this book. And the reason they do is because they make the claim that we were in the land from time immemorial and the Jews have come in and they've stolen the land from us. Okay? Well, Joan Peters, I believe she's British, was going to write a book about the Palestinian problem. And she believed that propaganda. So she started to write the book from the Palestinian point of view. And she is a very, very detailed researcher. And as she started researching out all the facts about whether the Arabs have been in the land of Israel from time immemorial, she found something very, very different from that claim. She discovered, and we'll go over this as we go through the history of Israel, she discovered that the land was basically deserted, just as Mark Twain discovered. There were some Arabs in the land, but it was basically deserted. And why did the Arabs come into the land? They came in because when the Jews started coming in, when we started coming in, we built the kibbutzim, we started industry, we started farms, we started towns, we started economic activity. And what did the poor Bedouins want? Jobs. And so the word got around and the Bedouins, as they always do, flooded to where the jobs were, flooded into the country. So that's when the majority of the Arabs came into the country, after the Jewish people started creating economic opportunities for them. This is what Joan Peters discovered, and she totally changed her perspective. She totally changed her tune. From being pro-Palestinian, suddenly she became pro-Jewish, pro-Israeli. That's what that book is all about. She totally refutes this claim that the Arabs have been in the land from time immemorial. So I would recommend this book to you. It is highly criticized by the Palestinian community, but it is simply facts. All right? So keep that in mind. Joan Peters, From Time Immemorial, The Origins of the Arab-Jewish Conflict over Palestine. All right. A friend of mine and a tour guide in Israel, Hila Crown Tamir, wrote this book, Israel, History in a Nutshell, highlighting the war and military history. You guys that have been with us in Israel, you know Hila, you remember her. So she has this book out, so that's an interesting book to read, Hila Crown Tamir. Also, Martin Gilbert, he wrote another, or produced another atlas. Oh, this one is a little broader than the previous one. This is the Atlas of Jewish History. It's a little broader than just the Arab-Israeli conflict, but it helps set the Arab-Israeli conflict in the context of the Jewish world. So this is a worthwhile book to get as well. Again, if you like maps, you're a visual type person, you'll really enjoy this book, Atlas of Jewish History. Dr. Michael Rydelnik, he's the Jewish Studies professor at Moody Bible Institute. He wrote this book a short time ago, Understanding the Arab-Israeli Conflict, a very worthwhile book as well to pick up. Michael Rydelnik. Again, this is in your bibliography. All this is in your bibliography. Arthur Kack, another book he wrote, The Rebirth of the State of Israel. Is it of God or of men? Because Israel gets criticized a lot these days. Oh, this is just a human thing. We're going to answer that question. Is the rebirth of the State of Israel of God or of men? And I believe this book is still available on Amazon. Arthur W. Kack, another worthwhile book to get. I've had this a long time, so I'm not sure, but I think one of the students in the morning class had checked with their smartphone and had found it on Amazon. So anyway, another worthwhile book getting. Also, Dr. Fruchtenbaum of Ariel Ministries, a study guide of Israel. He has a lot of historical information broken down into specific locations, specific cities, specific areas of Israel. So that's another book worth considering as well. Now, we're going to be looking at some videos in this class, and we're going to look at our first video in the second half of this session. But there's some videos that might be worth getting if you like videos. We're going to be looking at excerpts from this video, Against All Odds, Israel Survives, by Questar. So you'll see the first video today. You can decide whether to get it or not. But I've enjoyed looking at the videos on this DVD set. And the question being asked, does a divine power continue to uphold Israel? Does a divine power continue to uphold Israel? You know, there are churches today that say, no, Israel's been replaced by the church. There are churches today that say the state of Israel is just a fluke of history, means nothing. I will even be quoting a well-known local pastor who kind of tends toward that feeling himself. Anyway, we'll get to that. So, you know my bias. I'm already biased. Yes, the divine power does uphold Israel. So, well, let's look at some of the evidence for that. Also, we'll be looking at this DVD set by Abba Eban, Israel, A Nation is Born. It's kind of a classic documentary by Abba Eban. He is gone now. He was Israel's foreign minister, I believe, and UN representative for many years. So we'll look at this entire DVD here. Also, the History Channel has a DVD on Israel, The Birth of a Nation. You might want to pick that up as well. All right, so there's some additional material for you to continue your own studies during or after this class. Okay, any questions on that? Any questions? All right, turn to the next page. We're on page 8 now. And we're going to have an overview of the course. Just to tell you where we're going. Now, I have broken down this course into 4 basic sections. And we start with section 1 at the top, the spiritual war. This is our introductory material. This is the biblical material. You have to understand the biblical material to truly understand the modern state of Israel. So we'll be going through this biblical material. You won't necessarily need your Bible because every verse I put up will be up on the screen. If you want to bring your Bible, that's fine. But we will read every verse together up on the overhead screen. So we'll answer some questions. What is Zion? What is Zionism? A lot of controversy around that today. Then we'll look at biblical support for Zionism, the prophetic significance of Zionism, and some other principles that impact our study. You'll even have an article on Islam there. So that's section number 1, the introduction, the biblical material, the background. Then comes kind of the physical background, point 2 toward the bottom of the page there. Point 2 is an historical survey of the period from 66 AD to 1839. That's a quick overview of Jewish history to kind of set the context for the modern state. Then we move into point 3, the end of exile, 1839 to 1947. There's about 100 years there of the modern Zionist movement. The modern Zionist movement did not just pop into existence instantly. It has been going on for many, many years before the state got founded. So that's Israel past. Point 2 and point 3 are Israel past. Point 4, bottom of the page, I call the unending war. 1948 to the present, to 2013. We've been at war ever since the state was formed. It's unending. We'll find out why. We'll talk about that. So that's Israel present. So points 2 and 3 are Israel past. Point 4 is Israel present. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. I'm thinking of adding a 5th section to the course dealing with Israel future. What can we expect the modern state of Israel to experience in the future? Of course, that gets us into eschatology and all that. So we'll see if you guys want to do that by the end of the course. All right. All right. All right. Okay. Okay. I know better. You're right. Whoever said that. You're right. All right. All right, I'll work on putting together section 6. Who knows how long the course is going to last, though? Who knows? Oh, excuse me, that'll be section 5. Yes, section 5. Israel future. What we can expect. Yeah, the Messianic kingdom, right, exactly. All right, so that's where we're going over the next who knows how long. People ask me, how long will this course go? I say at least 40 weeks, you guys, maybe longer, okay? It's gonna, I got 2 notebooks this thick to go through, and so we're gonna.
You think we get another notebook?
No, you won't get another notebook. That's just my notes here. This is half my notes, okay? All righty, so there's where we're going. Now, we're right at a time for our break, and so we'll go take our break. After our break, we will see the first video from Against All Odds, Israel Survives. Program 1 is the introduction to this DVD series called The Assignment. So that's where we'll pick it up. It's a 26-minute segment. It'll fit fine into the last half of this session. So go ahead and take your break, listen for the shofar, and we'll come back and take a look at this video.